So we're going to work through a graduated haircut today, something that is designed to protect as much length as possible into the front of the hairline. Now, a lot of our graduations tend to become triangular because the guest wants the shorter length in the nape, is really in love with how much length they see into the front. Now, a lot of the times what tends to happen though is we start the haircut in the back, and as we progress away into the front, we're like running out of the length. We're like, oh no, how am I going to protect this length? How am I going to create this length? We're going to be working pretty simply today. We're just going to be working with a horizontal section that works from the left side to the right side, and we'll work that way all the way up to the back, and then at the apex down the mastoid process, we're going to change what our section look like, and we're going to rely on over direction to maintain as much length into that front as possible. So there's lots of ways that we can approach a graduated haircut. I see it all the time. People working more vertical sections, people working a diagonal to vertical section. Sometimes people just working a purely horizontal section. A section serves a purpose. A section is allowing you to connect two lengths of hair. Connecting links from left to right, top to bottom, or a combination of both if you're using a diagonal section. So with this approach, I'm going to be using a section that's horizontal, working left to right, because that's what's my priority. I want to connect the length of the internal to the length of the external. What that's going to allow me to do is to control more of my horizontal dimension. I'm going to control how that hair moves forward and backwards in a haircut from section number 1. In the front panel, I'm going to rely on more of a vertical diagonal section and over direct it back. This section is going to allow me to connect my length at the top to my length at the bottom of the haircut and rely solely on over direction to protect as much length moving forward as possible. For the paneling, I'm keeping it pretty simple. One thing I am creating is a deep side part. This is going to allow me to create a really strong geometric shape and a view of how that hair moves on one side of the part. The other panels are going from the apex down the mastoid process on both sides, and then apex down to the center of the nape for a center division point. I will have more hair on one side than the other, but again, this is just for aesthetics more than it is for practicality. My sectioning is just going to be horizontal. This is going to allow me to look at the length on the internal and look at the length on the external. To control each section, I'm going to comb up from the bottom to control my elevation, and then down to control my over direction. My cutting line is just going to be flat, which is going to allow me to protect the length at the outside of the hairline. Working from the inside to the outside, again, is going to allow me to look at the hair at the center division point and look at the length at the outside of the hairline, so I know what length my hair is going to be working the way forward. Because of the elevation in the hairline is going to appear to be a lot softer, and we want to leave that softness so we can clean it up in refinement and make a really clean outline. I'm going to comb my elevation up and then comb my section back down to control the over direction and to control the hair that I'm working on. My main concern is the root of the hair, to make sure that it's coming straight off of the head at the elevation that I need. Also want to make sure I'm not over directing it too much and twisting the outside of that hairline. I want to keep it flat to the back of the head. So imagine if you're just opening a dresser drawer and you pull the handle and then both sides of the drawer come out flat. That's what I'm envisioning, and that's what I'm looking for in my cutting line. One thing I want to be aware of is the shape that I see externally. And right now what I see is a reflection of the hairline. Even though we're over directing that back corner of the hairline back, there's still going to be a slight exposure of the hairline, because the hairline is working vertical. Had we not over directed section 1, I would not have the length that I have right now. Completing the lower part of panel number 1, it's more of the same, up for elevation, down for over direction, keeping that cutting line flat. So in my cross check, I'm just going to look vertically to inspect my elevation, and I'm going to cross check horizontally to look at my cutting line. My cutting line is strongly influencing my geometric shape right now, so I want to make sure that it's still solid all the way through. To complete the top of the panel, it's going to be more of the same, combing my elevation up and my over direction down. However, because of the curve of the hairline, the guide at the outside of the section is not going to reach the length at the inside of the section. So I want to make sure that as I progress my way up the back, that I'm always taking the guide from the center division and not the outside of the hairline. This will allow me to keep my cutting line consistent from the bottom all the way to the top. As I progress up, my elevation is going to slightly increase. This is going to allow me to create a much softer graduation vertically. So something that a guest or a client would call more rounded, because it's going to curve with the shape of the head, so it's less wedgy and bulky. My cross check now is I'm going to take a section from the top all the way to the bottom to inspect my elevation. If you notice here though, where my elevation got a little bit higher, my line is really flat. There's less of a buildup and more of almost a layered effect. So here's how I make my decision now on how I'm connecting my back to my front. If my guest is wanting something extremely long in the front length, and the only way I can connect it from the back to the front is using cutting line and no elevation, then I'm going to cut that front panel by dropping it all the way down and cutting it from long in the front to short in the back. That way I get that front length correct. The other way I look at it too is if that guest has a skinnier texture or a lower density and I want to protect more of the weight and length in the front, then I'll comb it all down in its natural fall and cut it. Or if the guest has a curlier formation and I'm trying to protect as much curl on the top or the surface of this as possible, I'm going to drop the curl down in its natural form. I'm just going to freehand cut and connect my lengths from back to front. So to connect my front length, I chose this time just to over direct everything back. I'm using a vertical diagonal forward section, which is going to allow me to pull the hair backwards easily, but also look at the length at the top and connect my length at the bottom in one fluid motion. My guide is stationary in this instance, so I'm pulling everything back to my first cut section. I could cut this in one giant section if I needed to, but I chose to work section by section for the most control. Combing the hair down, you can see our new expanded shape. Now on the opposite side, the one thing I want to really keep in mind is my finger position. Because we're working when our fingertips are on the outside of the hairline, we have a natural tendency to pull our fingers in towards our body when cutting. This is going to increase your line or increase your length. Now, if I wanted to take this approach from the very beginning to create as much length as possible, that'd be great, but I want to keep it consistent from side to side. My method of working is the same as it was before. I'm going to comb up from the bottom and then comb down from the top. This allows me to control the elevation and then control my over direction. Because I'm on the outside, my hand position is cutting from the outside of the section to the inside of the section. If you need to work from the inside to the outside, go right ahead. It won't change anything. This is just where my scissors are positioned, and this is the easiest and most comfortable way for me to work. And my really only concern on this side is just that finger position and keeping it consistent and flat to the back of the head all the way up. From the nape all the way to the top of the head, this side is going to be worked exactly the same as the previous side. As I reach to the top of the head, I'll start to comb my sections down into their natural fall and work all the way across the back of the head just to connect my lengths from side to side. In that front panel now, again, I'm working that vertical diagonal forward section, over directing everything back onto my back length. Now for this side, because it's my heavier side, I'm going to have a few more sections that I need to work. Once I reach above the hairline, I'm going to take one last section. If you notice, there's not really a section involved in it. It's just pulling all that hair back on top of my guide length and connecting the dots. In refinement, I want to keep it as minimal as possible, so I'm doing the amount of refinement that I would do behind the chair. If you notice, I don't really have a lot to clean up straight after my blow dry. I just have these little bits of fuzziness on the ends. That is really because of the outside of the hairline and how much over direction that I put onto that. It left some small inconsistencies, and that's what I'm cleaning up. I want to keep this pretty foundationally strong to what is going to be triangular. Again, I'm not looking for anything creative here. So pushing the head over exposes the underneath part of the hairline so I can get in there and clean all those little wispy guys up. I'm going to start in the bottom of the hairline and I'm going to work my way up. These are the hairs that I was talking about leaving alone at the very beginning. I'm just dusting those little guys up. So split this into a section because of how deep the part is. I'm kicking that hair out of the way and I'm just connecting my line at a pretty steep angle. You notice I'm working from the front up. This is allowing me to look at what that length is and cutting to my shorter length. Sometimes we have a tendency to work from short to long in this, and when we get to the front, we don't have enough length because we didn't know the right angle that we were working on. Again, I'm just cleaning up the hair that lives on the surface. I wanted to keep this as minimal as possible, just as I would do behind the chair. We don't have a ton of time sometimes behind the chair, so we can't go ahead and create this really strong avant-garde, graduated haircut. So keeping it salon reality, keep it focused on what I do behind the chair when I am working with a guest. So here's our end result, pretty balanced little graduated haircut. Now one side does look a little bit asymmetrical, and that's just because of the heavy side of the part. But there we go, salon friendly graduated haircut.